So welcome to UX Meetup 2024. My name's Andrew, along with Mara and Tish and Kat, sitting around here, right there. We're all part of the UX team here at Make Curious. This is not only a new space for us here, but also recently rebranded as well, which is pretty cool. We were a media suite for anyone who used to remember us. We're now Make Curious, and so after 20 years ago, we wanted to kind of get a reflected ethos of people who have a here. This is the first event that we've hosted here in some of the technical difficulties, so you can bearing with us. So this is a bit of a test run to see how things go here and what we can do to improve in the future. We're also taking over from Blake from Mentors, who was running the UX Meetup last year. He did a fantastic job, so just want to can't make it tonight. Just wanted to say thank you for doing that. We've got some awesome talks lined up this year, which is pretty exciting, but we've still got plenty of spaces. So we're always on the lookout for people who are keen to talk about something interesting to them, UX related or so. So if you've got something, even if it's short and sweet, we might be able to put a group of you together for some lightning talks and stuff. So come and talk to either myself or one of the team afterwards and we can discuss. Before we get started, a couple of things we need to point out. Emergency exits, the one just came through here, and there's also one just out here as well. Toilets are just found behind the palm tree there. There's an accessible toilet there as well. And yeah, so we're a wee bit late, but probably just after about 6 o'clock or so, the talk will run till. And we're probably looking at about finishing up around 7 o'clock or so that we can get home at some reasonable hour. This is being recorded just so we can share this and people can join from the live stream, but we'll send the link out as well afterwards so you can share that as well. A big thank you to our sponsors AWS and Canterbury Tech for sponsoring the Drinks and Refreshments Centre. Thank you very much. A tradition that I like to carry on that Blake started was for shout outs. So if anyone is looking for a job, struggling to fill a job, you're a freelancer looking for work, got a minute or so for anyone who's anything they'd like to share with the group stage.
Does anyone like playtesting games? New Zealand Game Devs has just got a session this Saturday on playtesting. It's a great way if you've never been involved, you don't want to see the process. Just have a bit of fun, and there's always pizzas.
Anything else? Cool. Okay. All right. So now we'll get on to the main event. I am super excited to introduce our presenter tonight, and also Philippa from iSign. Thank you very much for signing and contributing tonight. Someone who has we've had the pleasure of working with. And has helped us along our own accessibility journey. Dr. Chandra from Access Advisors. She'll be talking tonight about something that gets overlooked a little too often, and that's including people with access needs and research. So without any further ado, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew, and welcome. It's really lovely to see some familiar faces in the room. And I want to I'm going to do a shout out. I'm really sorry, Nick. I'm going to shout out for Nick, because if we talk about research and learning stuff about research, he's the man to talk to about mainstream research. He's the man to talk to, okay, later on. So I'll probably mention him in a bit. Anyway, yes, I'm Chandra, and I'm the Managing Director of Access Advisors. We're a group of experts in digital accessibility. And when we were talking about what I was going to say tonight, the agreement was we're not going to talk to you about what accessibility is, and we're not going to talk to you about how to do research per se. What we are going to talk to you is about the difference between mainstream research and doing research with people with access needs. Okay, so I just want to check how many people in the room don't know what digital accessibility is? Fab. How many people in the room have never interviewed somebody in a user research session? Okay, a couple of you. Okay, all right. But you know what we're talking about when we're talking about these sessions. So that's fabulous. So what we're going to do then is talk about the what, the where, the when, the why, the how of digital access, of the research. And now it doesn't, oh yeah, here we go. So I've titled it User Research with People with Access Needs. And the thing is, it's just user research with people with access needs. So everything that you know about user research, you need to apply in this, but it's got a little bit of nuance in there, and we need to be really aware of all of the other nuances. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very quickly tell you about me and Access Advisors. We're going to talk about some very quick facts. I'm not going to go into the details of digital accessibility, just some facts. We're going to look at why should we include users with access needs? When should we do what activities? What is inclusive research? Where should we be doing it? Who should we include in those sessions? And where do we find these mystical people? But also, and I think most importantly, how do we accommodate the access needs during user research? Part of the reason why we have Philippa, an NZSL sign interpreter here, is because research with people with access needs means that we do need to consider what they need and how they need the information communicated. So it's really important. So down here in the cheap seats is my brother and one of my teammates who are telling me to slow down. So there we go. Okay, so I've been doing research for probably more than 25 years. Yes, I really am that old. I used to work with Nick in London, and we did a few user research sessions, not mainstream, not accessibility, but anyway. My dad, that's a photo of me and my dad. My dad is a bit of the reason why I do this. He is dyslexic. When I was little, I didn't realise what that meant. And when he would ask Mum how to spell words, being a cheeky little monkey, I said to Mum one day, "Does that mean I'm smarter than Dad?" And she said, "No way." And so that's when I sort of started to realise that people's brains can work quite differently. I also identify as tangata whaikaha Pākehā, so recently identified as, oh my goodness, ADHD. If nobody realised I talk really fast under normal circumstances, but I didn't know. Anyway, I've kind of cycled through human-computer interaction, accessibility, user experience, business analysis, and now back again to accessibility. I came back to New Zealand and started working for the Blind Foundation because they kept on getting lots of organisations come to them and ask them for help. Cuban down here was one of the first people that were offering help. And what we did was in 2019, I kind of took over that organisation. And because I really love the research and because of the fact that the accessibility need, I suppose, or awareness has grown, we pushed the user research a little bit more. And we've created an accessibility panel, and we have about 250 people on that panel. We've got a fab team, as I mentioned, and our mission is really to help Aotearoa become more digitally inclusive. So, quick facts. Anybody know what the percentage of the population is? The percentage of the population with permanent access needs. That's just a click on it. Anybody down the back in the white t-shirt? So if we think about 24% of the population that has permanent access needs, that means that if you're going to do a sample of user research and say you're going to take 12 people as your sample size, that means statistically speaking, at least 3 of those people would have some form of access need. Yeah? How often are you including people with access needs in your research? Anyone? At all? Okay, that's why we're here. So, for the rest of us, other than that 24%, we have things like temporary needs. Here's a photo of Chandra with one of her broken limbs. And also situational access needs, right? Riding a bus and trying to text while you're holding on. Digital access need. Drunk in the pub trying to transfer money from one account to another. Digital access need. So what we need to do is think it's not just about blind screen reader users, is it? Right? So we need to be thinking about all of the sensory, cognitive, dexterity, and cultural and age-related issues, and be making sure that if we're doing inclusive research, we're including those people. Come on, you're going to do, oh, it's your one. Yeah. Oopsies. Sorry. So here's, this is a Microsoft image. And what it's showing you is that for every permanent access need, there is just as many people who have temporary access needs or situational access needs. So from a one-arm perspective, if I've been born one-arm or I've had an accident and I can only operate a keyboard one-handed, permanent. If I've broken my arm, then I can only operate a keyboard one-handed, temporary. Or if I'm carrying a baby or a computer or anything, then I've got only one arm, so I've got situational needs. Yeah? So if we think that that's the case, then my question is, why? Hang on. Oh. What we really need to do is that we need to be thinking about if we've got that higher percentage of people in the population who have permanent needs, and we all have some form of temporary or situational need, why is it that we're not doing this, right? We need to be doing this because all of the reasons that we do user research in the first case are relevant, right? We want to define user needs. But if we're excluding any of those access needs, you're missing out on insight that you wouldn't get otherwise. What I know is that if we think about how people will do things differently than you can possibly imagine, right? Whatever you think that they will do, this is true for mainstream users as well, but for disabled people, it can be very different. Many years ago, I was working for the BBC and we were doing some research on their website. We were working with people who were autistic, so quite high on the autistic spectrum. We had a young woman who came in for the research session. We chatted away, she was quite comfortable, and then I asked her to turn and look at the screen. Now, I don't know how long ago it was that you looked at the BBC website, but there was a news ticker that was going along the bottom of the screen. Now, this calm and collected human had then started clicking all around the screen. She was getting really frustrated and she couldn't stop it because there was no way to pause the ticker. And she saw some post-it notes right beside the computer. She picked up the post-it notes and stuck them over the screen so she didn't have to see the ticker going across. So that movement and the impact that that had on her was only evident in an observational situation with someone who had that level of autism, right? Most people would go, it's a ticker, whatever. But we got to see how much of an impact it had on her. We also need to think about the innovation and inspiration. It's really important to know that people who have an access need have spent their life creating workarounds and doing things differently because that's the only way they can do it. A colleague of mine, she was born with only one arm, and for her, asking her what it's like, she says, well, I don't know any different, right? But some of the things that she does and the way that she does things is very interesting. We also have another wonderful woman that we know, and she got sepsis and lost both of her arms and both of her legs. And I said to her, well, how do you use your mobile phone? And she says, actually, I'm using the stump on one arm. I'm using my nose, my chin, and my elbow. And you go, well, wow, okay. She can still text and type and do all of these things. But if we hadn't, had those conversations, you'd never know. The other thing is that talking to people who have access needs, doing usability testing, they're still people, They're still trying to achieve the task. So we get that usability bonus. So again, I said about that sample size of 12. If 3 of them have access needs, you haven't reduced your sample set of usability findings. You've just increased the type of information that you're going to get. You'll still get the usability stuff, but you'll get more of that other things as well. I think doing user research with people with access needs, someone said to me, oh, it's really inspirational. Well, actually, is it inspirational that a person is using a computer in a different way? Or is it enlightening that we don't consider it and that we don't think about how to design in a way that accommodates other people? I don't think that Corinne with the elbows and things is inspirational. I think she's amazing that she's been able to figure that out when these devices have been created for mainstream users. Obviously, we need to think about validating products, and it's the right thing to do if we think about the statistics and we think about the people. Okay, that's our why. Oh, wrong one. Okay, one of the biggest questions I get often asked is, when should we do user research with people with access needs? And I say, wow, when do you normally do your user research? The answer is as early and as often as you possibly can. And then people say, but how can you do user research with somebody who is blind if you've only got conceptual designs? Well, okay, so can't you pretend? Has anybody done Wizard of Oz, where you actually, the paper prototyping of the old days, where you'd have to talk people through and actually explain what the next thing is? I have pretended to be a screen reader on many occasions, right? I've got just the Figma files, but I can talk Julius potentially through what's going on there using my knowledge of the screen reader. So it's exactly the same as normal user research. As early and as often as you can, doing discovery from the beginning to help inform the design, iteratively throughout to improve. The other thing with doing those iterative reviews is you don't just have to test with somebody who is a blind screen reader user. Access needs is much broader than that. Remember, somebody who is neurodivergent, or somebody who has cerebral palsy, or there's lots of other things that you need to consider, not just your blind screen reader users. So they can still look at a Figma file and go, oh my God, that color is terrible, or hey, what are you going to do with that font, or whatever. So iteratively. And also for any organization that is doing, quantitative validating usability research before launch, we should absolutely be including a representative sample in those usability tests. And I also think that that ongoing monitoring and feedback from people who have access needs, we get feedback about how many people are accessing websites on their mobile phone or on a tablet or on a desktop. Yes? But do we have any insight into what kind of assistive tech people are using, or what settings they're using? We should be thinking about, what are the accommodations that people are, what are they changing to be able to use your website? And those analytics can really help. And the other thing is that I think that we should be incorporating people with access needs into our mainstream research, rather than thinking of it as, oh, we'll do usability testing and we'll do accessibility testing. 24% of the population has a permanent access need, and the rest of us will have some form of access need at some point. So it should be mainstream research. Questions? No? Good. Moving on. I'm going to get there eventually. Moving on. Now, do you remember these wonderful people? The question, this is when we were working together. There was one of Nick, but I took it out. So, is anybody familiar with any of these methods? Contextual interviews. Anybody ever done contextual interviews? Yeah, it's a mainstream tool. No different, right? Observation. Have you ever done observation to inform your designs? Yeah. Iterative concept reviews. Yeah. Surveys. Yeah. usability. Okay, you get the picture. So the thing is that what we're going to do with people who have access needs is fundamentally the same, especially if we've got it in our mainstream research. It should be the same. We're trying to still get the same information. We're just trying to take it to that next level. Yeah. As I mentioned, your iterative concept reviews might be a little different, but other than that, it's much the same. Okay, I did mention about monitoring usage. So we get asked quite a bit, quite often about how can we tell whether somebody's using a screen reader on our website? Okay, how do we feel about this question? Has anybody got any ethical issues with this? There are definitely ethical issues about this, but I think that there's other ways that we can monitor how people are using a website. We can tell if they're using keyboard, right? We can tell if you've built the right the right analytics into the websites or the solutions. You can tell if they're using mouse, keyboard, touch, etc., right? Because you can see whether it's a tap or a press or whatever else. Right? So there is analytics that you can build into there. We can look at the sales, obviously. Is there particular demographics that are going for particular things? And then we've got the configuration. If we think about the settings on your mobile phone, when you're doing A/B testing, for example, you could be thinking about, okay, shall we trial low color contrast in this one and high color contrast in this one? You could be thinking about monitoring what kind of brightness settings or whether people are using larger font or smaller font. So we can monitor a lot. That research is actually really quite rich. I personally think that monitoring device usage, other than mobile phones and so on, I think if we're trying to find out about their assistive tech, kind of crossing a bit of a boundary. Okay. The other thing that I think is vital from a research perspective is customer feedback. Now, I know I'm way over, but we had 10 minutes at the beginning, right? Okay, so the customer feedback. What we do know is that somebody who has an accessibility need or uses assistive technology is more likely to stop that user journey and fall out of that process, right? Are they not going to sign up for your bank account or your bank, whatever? They're not going to buy your products. So if we can create a way for them to give you immediate and direct customer feedback that says, I use this kind of tech and I was doing this thing and I had this problem, then you can feed that straight to the developers and say, hey, look, here's an accessibility issue that needs to be fixed, right? People are really scared, or what we found is a lot of our customers are quite nervous about putting in an email that says accessibility complaints or whatever, or accessibility at the bottom. Partly because of that monitoring, and they think that they're going to get a flood of emails. But actually, just by having the accessibility email, you've actually said to people, we care, right? And what I would say to you is only the people who are going to have real issues are going to use that. And quite often, that's actually a feedback loop into the product lifecycle. Xero, my colleague Lila from Xero, she said that as soon as they implemented the accessibility email in the feedback chain for the Xero software, they suddenly went, oh man, they're having this problem. Hey guys, that's another backlog, a product enhancement that we can do. So they were learning so much more. So don't be frightened to do that. However, we do need to be very careful to make sure that we provide multiple channels for feedback. So another reason why we have Philippa is that we were talking with one of the larger telcos, and it happened that there was a deaf gentleman, and that's deaf with a capital D. He was having a problem with his mobile phone or his package, and he went online and they said, well, call us and we'll sort it out. Obviously, he's not going to be able to call them, so he got his daughter to make the call, but then they wouldn't verify any of the details because it wasn't him on the line. And no matter how many times she told him, my father is deaf, he can't have a conversation with you over the phone, can we email you the details? They just kept on saying, no. So we need to think about those multiple channels. Email is good for some people. Phone is really good for some people. But we also need to be thinking about people who don't like to talk to others. Using a chat or a feedback form is really good for people who are on the spectrum so that they can take their time and think through the questions that they want to ask or the information that they want to provide. So it's really important to think about those other things. And also a relay service, which is where you have the person who is the caller, who may be deaf, and then you have a relay service in the middle who is authorised to act on their behalf, sort of. And the deaf person or the person who can't speak would then communicate with the relay system. It might be a text relay system, it might be a video relay system, and then the person in the middle then communicates. And what we found is that this is often really difficult because of those security issues. So, feedback. All right, oops, okay. Where do you normally do your research? So in their own spaces, lab or office, remote online, anywhere you can, right? Now the difference is that there are a few nuances around the logistics, but we'll come to that in a minute. What I would say is that ideally, as if we're doing any discovery research or qualitative or formative research, we should do it in situ if we can. Yes, Nick, should we do that? Yes, we should, thank you. So I think that the richness of going to someone's home, having a conversation with them and seeing what their setup is like. A lot of people who use assistive tech may have a lot of additional devices, or in this instance, far image, he's using a SIP and puff controller, and he's in a powered wheelchair, and he's got multiple screens. So you won't get that if you just do a Zoom call. So it's really useful. The lady down the bottom, she has Parkinson's, and we didn't know that she was also low vision. So when we turned up to her house to do some research, we were asking her questions about her Parkinson's, and then I saw over in the corner that she had a low vision reading aid, and we started that conversation. You would never get that if you were just doing online. But obviously, remote is now a real thing. The St John's screenshot there, I know it's not very, you can't really see, but there's me and one of our access panel members. Anaru is amazing. He is a tetraplegic, no movement of any of his limbs, and he uses an on-screen mouse. So you can just see the little white buttons there on the top. Yeah, right, yeah. So this is his on-screen mouse. So he just basically moves his head to control the mouse. There's a left click, right click, whatever. Now, we can get that information from him online, but actually getting him to our offices would have been really difficult. So you've got to play the game wherever suits. Okay. Oh, Zoom is the best platform. It is the most accessible. Teams, unfortunately, isn't always as accessible. I'm going as fast as I can. Nothing about us without us. Okay, so who should we include in this mix? Who do you think? If we had to pick who you would choose, who would be those three people? Who would you choose? What kinds of access needs would you think you should choose? Anyone? Yeah?
Physical, neurological, and situational.
Possibly. I would go with physical. Sure. Dexterity is a good one. Yep. Neurological, cognitive, neurodivergent. Yep. And what was the last one you said? Situational. I'd probably actually go with vision, sensory, right? And the reason behind that is because when you watch someone use a screen reader, you get a whole new perspective on life, okay? So even if you want to get like, 2 or 3 blind people and 2 or 3 deaf people and 2 or 3 neurodivergent people, 2 or 3 people with dexterity issues, it can be difficult. Logistically, it can be difficult. So what we want to do is we want to get people who have access needs, for sure. But getting a representative sample can be sometimes a little bit hard. So we do need to be pragmatic about this. And if you've got a sample of 12 and you get 3, one that's sensory, one that's physical, and one that's cognitive, awesome. You've probably found a whole lot more information than what you thought before. One person is definitely better than none. And what you really want is someone who looks at the world or at life differently than you do, so that you're getting that different experience. Does that make sense? Okay, awesome. And where do we get these wonderful people from? Well, you can go to my market research agency. There are agencies out there that do provide people. However, they usually don't have a good representative group of people who have access needs, lots and lots of the cognitive, not a lot of the others. We could create an online community of your own customers, and we've got a couple of our long-term clients who we're helping work with them to create their own online community. Great if you've got the time and the money and the size to be able to do it. In-store interviews can be a bit hit and miss. Any idea why? Any thoughts about why? And Kevin?
Yes. You did an in-store interview, depends who's turning up that day. Yeah.
It does depend who's turning up that day. Statistically speaking, 1 in 4 people who walk through that door will have an access need, but most of them are invisible access needs, right? So from a cognitive perspective, maybe a dexterity perspective, you may not be able to see that. You might see them in a wheelchair, but actually most wheelchair users, many wheelchair users have no digital access needs because they can use their hands, brain's all there, sight's all there, no problem. So in-store interviews, not so great. Workmates, friends and family. It is a valid recruitment method. However, yeah, it really is. The only thing is that if you start asking your friends always, hey, I'm doing a bit of research, can you come along and be the neurodivergent on the team? Can get a bit tedious, right? We won't tell my husband, but my husband has also got dyslexia, and he always goes, are you going to ask me again? So he doesn't come to any of the panels. So this can be hit and miss as well. You can also go to individual advocacy groups. So you could go to the Blind Foundation and Deaf Blind, and you could go to Deaf Aotearoa, you could go to any number of these different advocacy groups. But each time you go there, you're increasing the finances, right? And you're only getting that group's perspective. And quite often, when you go to an individual advocacy group, you're getting the political response rather than the real visceral response. You could also go to a specialist access panel, blatant plug like us. Okay. All right, this is Lachlan, who was one of our first Access panel members. Lachlan is just amazing, and he is one of those people, he's on the spectrum, and low vision, and when you ask him a question, you get the answer, right? It's he's very responsive. Okay. How's everybody else for comfort? Nobody's wriggling too much? Are we good time-wise? Okay, cool. Only 3 or 4 more slides. Logistics. Okay, can we have a look at this list here? When you're doing user research, we need a prototype, right? Yep. We need a device to do the research on. We need somewhere to do it. We need to make sure that the lighting and the noise is okay. But what about the assistive tech and the technology that you are using to record the sessions? And what about how to communicate with your participants? So Philippa and I were having a conversation just before about when you're communicating with somebody who is an NZSL user, you need an interpreter in the room. right? If you are getting someone who is blind to sign the consent form, you need to either help them or make that a digital consent form. So there's lots of that stuff that we take for granted when we're doing user research that we've got to really think through. From a lighting and noise perspective, my lady with the ticker, she needed to have all of the lights turned off so that she wasn't stressed by the lighting, because if you've got fluoro lighting, it can really set people off. We do need to be clear, okay, if you're doing user research with a prototype, that's fine, but wherever we can, we want to use their own assistive tech rather than, you know, getting somebody else's random laptop and then they don't know how to use it. Okay, the biggest thing that I think we need to be aware of from a logistics perspective is things like the time that it takes. So if you've scheduled a 1-hour session for your mainstream users, you will absolutely need 1.5 hours for your physical and your sensory people, and you probably only need 10 minutes for your neurodivergence, but that's another story. So you have to be thinking about the time. You have to have that flexibility. You have to be aware that if you say it's going to be half an hour, you stop at half an hour. For some people, Mandy, the image on the first screen, for Mandy, she participates in research for us, but if we spend more than the allocated time, she might have a seizure, which is a real possibility. So we do have to really respect that. So in general, most of the stuff is the same, but the people is the bit that's different. Okay, and yes, when you're doing user research, you've got to think about the person that's sitting in the chair. For any of you who have done user research before, have you ever had that really annoying person who was really difficult to interview? Anyone? Probably neurodivergent. And if you'd known that beforehand, you probably would have done your research in a different way, right? Many years ago, I was doing mainstream research, and this man came in. He was the next participant. Come on in, sir. And he just started swearing at me and cursing, and I was like, oh, you know, just have a seat and we'll get started. What had happened was he had Tourette's. No one had told me, and if they told me, I would have been able to deal with that in a whole different way, because he was so uncomfortable and he didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do because I'm thinking, what the hell, what? And then it clicked. And then we had a conversation about his Tourette's. And as soon as we had a conversation about his Tourette's, hey presto, he was human, I was human, and we could get on with the mainstream research. It's great. Okay. We need to know about the access needs. And if anybody was to ask me what's the biggest difference between mainstream research and users with access needs, it's actually knowing how those access needs manifest themselves, right? If you don't know, then you can mistake what they've done, or you can assume that it's something else. So you have to really know what is the access need that they've got so that you can recognise the behaviour. So another situation, I had a gentleman who came in for some research, and he said, oh, I've got to bring my carer with me. And I was like, yeah, sure. This was many years ago, and I wasn't as worldly wise. So he brought his carer in, and his carer basically sat on the chair and started playing on his mobile phone, and the guy started doing the research. And then at one point, obviously, the pitch in his voice changed, and you could see he was starting to get a little bit agitated. The carer wasn't there for the dude. The carer was there to protect me, because the dude basically had autism, and once he got wound up, he could actually get quite aggressive. So the carer basically leaned forward on the chair and said, are you just about done? And I went, yes, I'm good. And away we went. So you do have to be aware of what can happen. That's an extreme situation. It doesn't always happen. Okay, spoons. Anybody know about spoon theory? Awesome. Kat, what's spoon theory? So she learned this morning. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, spoon theory is all about the fact that you've got a certain amount of energy or a certain amount of spoons per day to use for everything. And somebody who has a chronic illness or who has disabilities of some form, they may actually have way less spoons to use in a day than you do. And you need to know that when they've walked in the door. If they've had trouble getting to your office, if they have had a really hard day getting dressed, or whatever, you need to know that. We have more people cancel with access needs because some days they just can't get out of bed, literally. So we have to be aware. We also need to think about how can we phrase the questions. So if I'm asking someone a question, somebody on the spectrum or who's neurodivergent might take it very differently than somebody who may be deaf and is being interpreted. So we have to be really careful. Okay, the biggest thing is making sure that somebody is comfortable, right? And I mean, I'm a very relaxed user research in general anyway, right? I kind of make friends with them, but it's even more important when you have somebody who is basically opening up themselves to you. And one of the big things is you never ever say, so what's wrong with you? I've heard it be asked. Instead, we do want to know, and we say, well, can you just tell us a little bit about your story, as much as you want to share, so that we understand your access needs, not, so what's wrong with you? Okay, cool. Respect, yeah? Okay. I am very aware of the time, and now we've gone way over. The etiquette, guiding visual impaired people, you need to know how to do this. I mentioned about the support people. Please, if somebody asks to bring a support person, you need to allow them. Assistance animals, so these are our colleagues, and the lady in the yellow shirt is guiding the gentleman in the blue shirt, and then he's got his assistance dog. Anybody know the one rule about an assistance dog when they're in the harness? Yeah? Do not interact with them. You can ask to interact with them, but do not interact with them. Right? And if you're doing user research, put a bowl of water out for the dog, right? It's real easy. Wheelchairs and crutches. Don't push people around or take their crutches. This is as much of them as my glasses, or actually even more, my whatever. Toilets, important. Transport and parking is also important because a lot of people who have access needs actually will struggle to get from point A to point B. So if you can allow parking or you can pay for transport, really important. I'm getting there. Last one. Okay. So I'm going to read this one because otherwise I'm... Right, so we know this is the Vetero man, yeah? Just a human, just a real person. So I think any research participants are first and foremost people, and we always should treat them with respect and humanity, right? People with access needs can absolutely teach us something that we didn't already know if we want to listen to it, right? Doing research with people with access needs is absolutely worth doing, early and often. It's just the same as mainstream research, just takes a bit more time, a bit more patience, and a bit more understanding. And I know I'm way over, but thank you. Okay. I'm sorry, so long. That is okay with me. Anyone? Yeah. Yep, you grab one of my flyers, you have my details, and yeah, you talk to us. Okay, cool. That's all good. But you give them the contact details. Any other questions? Anything online? What? Yeah, down here in the blue shirt.
Are there any colours that you wouldn't recommend to pair together?
And that's a different story. That's a question about digital accessibility, not about research with digital accessibility. I can tell you later if you want. But pairing, it's not about which colours, it's about the colour contrast between the two colours. Yep. Any other questions? My client has 275,000 employees, yet I have trouble finding users with access needs. The client is concerned about privacy, and the accessibility expert who knows many users is a gatekeeper. Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I go back to the statistics of 1 in 4, but I also go back to the fact that actually relying on your employees to do accessibility research is not necessarily the best idea, right? It's not their job to be an accessibility research participant. They've probably got other jobs. And we've got to be really careful that we're not asking the Māori person in the room to do the karakia all the time. Does that make sense? We need to make sure that we're getting a representative sample for sure. We definitely need the 24%. But if we can't get it internally, we need to go externally. That's one part of the question. The other is that the accessibility person is the gatekeeper. What the hell is this person doing? I mean, from an advocacy perspective, I would be going to them and saying, aren't you supposed to advocate and get these people involved? I would be suggesting that you need to have a conversation with the accessibility gatekeeper and say, hey, I can help you, get more rather than you stopping us from accessing people that you know of. I do agree about the privacy stuff. We do need to be careful. Not everybody wants to tell their employer what their access need is. They don't necessarily want to be constantly hounded. Oh, hey, I understand that you're colourblind. Which colours would you prefer on the website? You don't want that. That's not your job, right? But I do think nothing about us without us. Most people with access needs want to be part of the solution. So if you ask them confidentially or in general and sort of say, hey, organisation, do we have anybody that wants to participate in some research about this, that, and the next thing? Respond to us confidentially. You may find that you've got a better response. Does that help? Okay. Sorry, anyone else? Sorry, in the back, the green t-shirt. Yep.
There's a difference in terms of thanking them for their time and that sort of thing for people with access.
Oh, that's a good question. Do you mean the koha that the incentive? No. So, Gib? Oh, yeah, I'll repeat the question to the microphone. The question was, do I think that the incentive that we pay people with access needs is any different than people, mainstream users? I think it definitely should never be less. Personally, I think it always should be more. And we encourage our clients to do that because you are paying a premium for a specific set of insights, right? So if you're going to, interview stock exchange brokers, you pay them more because you can't get hold of them. They're hard to pin down. So I believe that from an incentive perspective, we should pay them more. However, there's all caveats around that because a lot of them are on benefits and there's the tax implications. So when we do it, it's a koha. We're not paying them for their time. We're saying, hey, thank you for, sharing our space, if that makes sense. Does that help? Yeah? Okay, cool. Yep. There was another one in the red shirt, pink shirt.
Like tools that you use to gauge how accessible your site is?
It's the question is any online tools that we use to gauge how accessible our website is. There are lots, but that's a digital accessibility question, nothing to do with the research. However, just because you've got to get really familiar with the prototype before you do it, I'd be saying that you need to do a screen reader test with your prototype. You need to do a keyboard only test with your prototype. It's a whole nother session for a whole nother day. Okay? Get my details and we can talk. All right. Have we got time for one more, or has everybody had enough now? Nick?
And it might be just like that sort of keep talking.
Okay.
Remind me of WTF. Talked up thousands of these usability sessions, and I can say with absolute certainty it's not 1 in 4.
Yeah. And what do you mean?
Essence of encountering people with accessibility needs is not 1 in 4.
No.
It's more like 0 in thousands.
Yep.
I might have had people with those and using hearing aids, sort of thing, and I've had people at different ends of their lives.
Yep.
And with all the things that come with those sorts of things.
Yep.
But I'm interested to hear you talking about why that might be.
Okay.
And when you say that that's including research for different
Yeah.
adults.
Yeah.
We have the clients that grow, we've got the sessions.
Yeah.
And we want 3 people like this, 3 people like that, 4 people who didn't use the product.
Yep.
And some people who do this.
Yep.
2 people who unsubscribe.
Yep. Yep.
How do you build that in?
Okay, so there's lots of, yeah, so let's go to the last one first. The question is, how do you convince your clients to make sure that they're including somebody with access needs when they're only asking you to do 10 participants and they've got very strict criteria? So the answer to the question is that actually, statistically speaking, at least 1 or 2 of those 10 possibly have an access need that you're not aware of, and that should be part of the screener, right? You can absolutely, as part of your screeners, your questionnaires to, get your participants, you can absolutely be asking the question, do you have any disabilities or access needs or whatever? So you could ask that question so that you could know whether or not one of those 10 has an access need. But also, you will find that if you use a specialist research access panel, actually most of those criteria, the other criteria, the lived criteria, how many, okay, so say we've got a bank and a bank wants 10 participants and they want 5 of them that are current customers and 5 that are not current customers. Okay, so I can give you 10 who have access needs, no worries. And you get 10 for a usability or discovery or whatever else. So it's about the way you ask the questions. That's the one thing, I think. But it's also about highlighting it to your clients about why it's so useful. And I think just being an advocate is really important to try and just push them a little bit further and make sure that when you're trying to recruit, you're trying to say, can we just try, someone who we know is really neurodivergent. I will volunteer for any of your research, Simon. Yeah. And the first part of the question was around why is it that you haven't ever been asked to recruit someone with access needs? Well, you will have naturally encountered them. You absolutely will have, 100% sure. No. Okay, so probably not to that level, but we're not just talking about blind screen reader users or assistive tech users, right? We're also talking about the people who are on the spectrum who actually just need to dial down the noise, or who get freaked out by the ticker on the app, or who are wearing hearing aids and need to be interviewed in a quiet environment. Yeah. You are more than likely to have met someone. The other thing is do you know what to look out for? that's the other thing is, right, if you're walking, sorry, I am just talking, sorry. If you're walking down the street and you see someone with their mobile phone right up against their face while they're answering a text message, chances are they've got low vision, access need. If you see somebody walking along and they're talking to their mobile phone's talking to them, access need. So it's possible that you haven't seen that because you may not have been asking the right questions or discussing that. Sorry, do we need to wrap it up or is it, yeah? Okay.
Simply where so you know that there's also probably that they have access needs.
So, holy moly. 53 years old I was when people might have started saying, hey, Chandra, have you actually thought about going and getting an assessment? And okay, I always talked like this. I always got in trouble. I always broke things, arms, legs, whatever. But I never even thought about it. And I've been working in the accessibility space for years. There are such a huge percentage of people who don't know that they're on the spectrum, don't know that they've got ADHD, that don't know that they've got dyslexia, that don't even realise that they're actually legally blind even.
World Health Organization think it's up to 14% of the population and across the world that have got undeclared cognitive issues.
Unknown.
Unknown and undiagnosed, and that they have actually flagged that as a major issue for the World Health Organization's
Yeah.
It's a massive issue.
Yeah, but it's a massive issue. Should we finish with Kev?
Just going to say, I'll have to repeat it, but there's a lot of people who won't recognise that they have one and won't wish to recognise it, is the other point.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah, it's the eyesight, it's the cognitive, it's also the dexterity as well, right? My dad, thrust into the digital world as a dyslexic, and he has to make the font so big that most of the apps look rubbish. So, yeah. Sorry, what?
That we are born with 10,000 illnesses at the time of birth.
Sure.
Without anything bacterial-wise or anything else. What we actually start out with, the potential's there for us to have one of those.
Oh my gosh. Okay, cool.
We'll do very, very well.
We do. Okay, look, thank you for being so patient. That was a really long chat. So, okay.
Thank you.